Hundreds of wolves stare as Cassandra stands in the great hall. I have no connections to this pack, but I lived in a warehouse, working for every meal. That's what leadership needs. How did a disowned Omega end up here? Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from and click subscribe. The wedding dress hung in the corner of the cramped studio apartment, its white fabric looking almost gray in the dim light filtering through the single window. Cassandra Vale stared at it, wondering for the 100th time if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Tomorrow she would marry Adrian Frost, an alpha who lived in a converted warehouse on the edge of pack territory, who worked odd jobs to survive, who sometimes went days without a proper meal. Her family had stopped speaking to her 3 weeks ago when she'd announced her decision. Her mother had actually wept, not tears of joy, but of shame and disappointment. Her father had simply walked away, unable to even look at her, and her sister, perfect, golden Charlotte, had laughed in her face and asked if Cassandra had lost her mind entirely. Maybe she had. Maybe agreeing to marry an alpha with nothing to his name, no pack standing, no prospects beyond the bare minimum survival was insane. But when Cassandra looked at Adrian, when she felt the mate bond humming between them with absolute certainty, none of that seemed to matter. He was hers. She was his. The moon goddess didn't make mistakes about these things. The bond had formed 6 months ago at a neutral territory gathering, one of those events where unmated wolves from different packs mingled in hopes of finding their destined match. Cassandra had been there reluctantly, dragged along by Charlotte, who'd insisted that at 24, Cassandra was getting too old to be choosy. She'd been standing by the refreshment table, trying to avoid eye contact with the aggressive alphas who kept approaching with pickup lines and expectations, when she'd felt it. That pull, that magnetic certainty that somewhere nearby was the other half of her soul. She'd turned, and there he was, tall, with dark hair that was slightly too long and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He was wearing simple clothes, clean but clearly old, and he held himself with a quiet dignity that had nothing to do with status or wealth. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and the bond snapped into place so forcefully that Cassandra actually gasped. She could feel him suddenly, not just his physical presence, but his emotions, his thoughts, his very essence intertwining with hers. He felt it too. She could see the recognition in his eyes, the same shock and certainty and overwhelming sense of rightness that was flooding through her. He'd walked toward her slowly, never breaking eye contact, and when he finally stood in front of her, he'd said simply, "I'm Adrian. I think we need to talk." They'd talked for hours that night, sitting on a bench outside the gathering hall while the party continued without them. Adrian had been honest from the start, brutally honest in a way that most wolves never were on a first meeting. He told her he was from the Northern Frost Pack originally, but he'd left 5 years ago after a disagreement with the Alpha. He lived alone now, worked construction and odd jobs, had almost nothing to his name beyond a converted warehouse space and the clothes on his back. He told her that if she chose to accept the mate bond, life with him would be difficult. There would be no pack support, no comfortable home, no certainty about where the next meal was coming from. But here's what he hadn't told her, at least not directly, that despite having nothing material, he had everything that mattered. Integrity that wouldn't bend regardless of the consequences. Kindness that extended to everyone he met, not just those who could offer him something in return. A strength that had nothing to do with dominance and everything to do with quiet resilience. An intelligence that saw through social pretenses and valued truth over comfort. When Cassandra had gone home that night and told her family about meeting her mate, she'd been so full of joy that she'd actually expected them to be happy for her. Instead, her mother had immediately asked about his pack standing, his family connections, his prospects. And when Cassandra had explained that Adrian was a rogue, living alone with no status or wealth, the joy had died in her mother's eyes. "You can't be serious," her mother had said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Cassandra, you're from the Vale family. We have standing, connections, a reputation to maintain. You can't throw all that away for some rogue alpha with nothing to offer." "He's my mate," Cassandra had replied, as if that should have been explanation enough. "The bond is real. The moon goddess chose him for me." Her father had sighed heavily. "The moon goddess also gives us free will, Cassandra. You don't have to accept this bond. You can reject him, find someone more suitable, someone who can actually provide for you and any children you might have." "I'm not rejecting my mate," Cassandra had said firmly, and that had been the beginning of the end of her relationship with her family. Over the following months, as Cassandra and Adrian's relationship deepened, the pressure from her family had only increased. They'd tried everything: bribery, emotional manipulation, introducing her to other alphas, threatening to disown her. Her sister Charlotte had been particularly cruel, making comments about Cassandra settling for scraps, about how embarrassing it would be to have a rogue alpha in the family, about how their parents' friends were already gossiping about the Vale daughter who'd lost her mind. But through it all, Adrian had been steady. He never tried to convince Cassandra to stay with him if it meant losing her family. He never pressured her or made her feel guilty for considering rejection. He simply loved her, openly and honestly, and left the choice entirely in her hands. And Cassandra had chosen him. She'd chosen love over status, connection over comfort, truth over appearances. Tomorrow she would marry Adrian in a small ceremony, with only a handful of friends attending, because her family had made it clear they wouldn't be there. She would move into his converted warehouse, would learn to live on a tight budget, would face the judgment and pity of every wolf who knew about her choice. But she would also wake up every morning next to her mate, would build a life based on genuine partnership, would prove that worth had nothing to do with wealth or status. A knock on her apartment door startled Cassandra from her thoughts. When she opened it, Adrian stood there with a small bouquet of wildflowers, clearly picked from somewhere nearby rather than bought from a shop. "I know it's bad luck to see you before the wedding," he said with a slight smile, "but I wanted to make sure you were okay. I can feel your anxiety through the bond." Cassandra took the flowers, their simple beauty somehow more meaningful than any expensive arrangement could have been. "I'm okay," she said, and realized it was true. Just thinking about everything that's led to tomorrow. Adrian stepped inside, his presence immediately making the small apartment feel warmer. "You can still change your mind," he said quietly. "If this is too much, if giving up your family is too high a price, I'll understand. I'll walk away, let you reject the bond, let you find someone your parents would approve of." Cassandra set the flowers down and turned to face him fully. "Do you want me to change my mind?" "Of course not," Adrian said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're everything to me, Cassandra. You're my mate, my partner, the other half of my soul. Losing you would destroy me." "Then stop suggesting I walk away," Cassandra said firmly. "Adrian, I've spent my entire life trying to meet my family's expectations, trying to be the perfect daughter, the ideal pack member, the acceptable future mate for whoever they deemed worthy. And I was miserable. I never fit quite right into the mold they wanted me in." She moved closer to him. But with you, I don't have to fit any mold. I can just be myself. Messy, uncertain, sometimes afraid, but always genuine. That's worth more than any amount of pack standing or family approval. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and Cassandra felt the mate bond pulse with warmth and certainty. This was right. This was where she belonged. I promise I'll work hard, Adrian murmured against her hair. I'll do everything I can to give you a good life, even if it's not the comfortable life you're used to. I don't need comfortable, Cassandra replied. I just need you. They stood there for a long moment, simply holding each other, drawing strength from the bond between them. Then Adrian pulled back, his expression turning serious. There's something I need to tell you before tomorrow, he said. Something I should have explained earlier, but wasn't sure how to bring up. Cassandra felt a flicker of anxiety. What is it? It's about why I left the Northern Frost Pack, Adrian began carefully. I told you I had a disagreement with the Alpha, which is true, but I didn't tell you what that disagreement was about. He moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. The Alpha wanted to implement some new policies that I believed were wrong. They involved restricting Omega rights, limiting who could mate with whom based on bloodlines. And you disagreed, Cassandra said, understanding dawning. I more than disagreed. I publicly challenged those policies. I argued that the moon goddess pairs mates regardless of status, that love and genuine bonds should be valued over political connections, that every wolf deserves dignity and choice regardless of their designation. Adrian turned back to face her. The Alpha was furious. He gave me an ultimatum: accept his new order or leave the pack. So I left. I walked away from everything, my position, my status, my inheritance, because I couldn't in good conscience support something I believed was fundamentally wrong. Cassandra felt her chest tighten with emotion. You gave up your inheritance? It was never really mine anyway, Adrian said with a slight shrug. It came with conditions, with expectations to uphold systems I couldn't support. What kind of person would I be if I valued wealth over principles? The kind of person my family wanted me to marry, Cassandra said softly. She crossed the room and took his hands in hers. Adrian, you just made me even more certain about tomorrow. You stood up for what you believed in, even when it cost you everything. That's the kind of person I want to spend my life with. That's the kind of Alpha who deserves my loyalty and love. Even if it means living in a warehouse and wondering sometimes where our next meal will come from. Even then, Cassandra confirmed. Besides, I'm not completely useless. I can work too, you know. We'll figure it out together. Adrian smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Together, he agreed. After he left, Cassandra lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about the conversation. There was still so much she didn't know about Adrian's past, about his life in the Northern Frost Pack before he'd walked away from it all. But what she did know was enough. He was principled, brave, kind, and completely devoted to her. Everything else was just details. The wedding took place in a small garden on neutral territory, attended by exactly 11 people. Adrian's friends from his construction crew, a few wolves Cassandra had met through him, who valued character over status, and one elderly Omega named Margaret, who'd known Adrian since he first arrived in the city and had apparently taken him under her wing. No one from Cassandra's family appeared. She'd sent invitations knowing they'd be ignored, but part of her had hoped that maybe someone would show up. Her mother, perhaps, unable to stay away from her daughter's wedding despite her disapproval. But the chairs reserved for family remained empty. and Cassandra had to swallow past the lump in her throat as she walked down the makeshift aisle alone. Adrian stood at the end waiting for her, dressed in a simple dark suit that was probably borrowed or bought second-hand, but fit him perfectly. His eyes were locked on her face, and the love and admiration she saw there made all the pain of her family's absence fade into background noise. This was what mattered. This moment, this man, this choice to build something real and true regardless of the cost. The ceremony was short and simple, conducted by an elder from a neighboring pack who'd agreed to officiate as a favor to one of Adrian's friends. There were no elaborate decorations, no expensive flowers, no grand speeches. Just two wolves standing before witnesses and making promises to each other that had nothing to do with status or wealth, and everything to do with genuine commitment. I, Cassandra Vale, take you, Adrian Frost, as my mate, Cassandra said, her voice clear and steady, despite the emotions churning in her chest. I promise to stand beside you in good times and bad, to support your principles, even when they cost us comfort. To build a life with you based on truth and genuine connection rather than appearances or expectations. I promise to love you not for what you can give me materially, but for who you are fundamentally. Adrian's voice was rough with emotion as he made his vows. I, Adrian Frost, take you, Cassandra Vale, as my mate. I promise to work hard to provide for you, to honor the sacrifices you've made to be with me, to never take for granted the choice you made to choose love over comfort. I promise to be worthy of your faith in me, to build with you something that matters more than wealth or status, to love you with everything I am for the rest of my life. When they sealed the bond with a kiss, Cassandra felt something shift deep in her chest. The mate bond, which had been present but not fully activated, suddenly blazed to life with an intensity that took her breath away. She could feel Adrian completely now, his emotions, his thoughts, his absolute devotion to her. And she knew he could feel the same from her, the certainty that she'd made the right choice, the joy that overshadowed any grief about her family, the deep, abiding love that had nothing to do with practical considerations. The small reception was held in the same garden, with simple food provided by Adrian's friends and music from someone's portable speaker. It should have felt inadequate compared to the elaborate pack weddings Cassandra had attended in the past. Instead, it felt perfect, intimate and genuine, in ways those grand affairs never had been. Margaret, the elderly Omega, pulled Cassandra aside at one point during the celebration. I need to tell you something, dear, she said, her wrinkled face serious. About your new mate. What about him? Cassandra asked, immediately alert. He's a good man, better than most I've known in my 80 years, Margaret continued. But there's more to his story than he's probably told you. More about who he was before he came to the city. I know he left his pack, Cassandra said carefully. He told me about the disagreement with the Alpha. Did he tell you which Alpha? Margaret asked pointedly. When Cassandra shook her head, the old Omega sighed. The Northern Frost Pack isn't just any pack, child. It's one of the oldest and most powerful in the territories, and Adrian didn't just walk away from some minor position. Before Margaret could say more, Adrian appeared at Cassandra's elbow. Margaret, he said, his tone gentle but firm. I'll tell her everything in my own time, please. The old Omega studied him for a long moment, then nodded. As you wish. But don't wait too long, Adrian. Secrets have a way of coming out, and it's better she hears the full truth from you. After Margaret moved away, Cassandra turned to Adrian. What was she talking about? What haven't you told me? It's not a secret exactly, Adrian said, running a hand through his hair. Just additional context that didn't seem important when we were getting to know each other. But you're right. You should know everything. Let's go home and I'll explain. Home, it turned out, was even more modest than Cassandra had imagined. The converted warehouse was essentially one large room with a sleeping area curtained off in the corner, a tiny kitchen against one wall, and a bathroom that looked like it had been added as an afterthought. The furniture was minimal, clearly second-hand, but everything was clean and organized with a care that spoke of someone who took pride in what little they had. "I know it's not much," Adrian said, watching Cassandra take it all in. "I've been saving up to maybe find something better, but on construction wages, it's slow going." "It's fine," Cassandra said, and meant it. She'd lived in luxury all her life and had been profoundly unhappy. Maybe simplicity was exactly what she needed. "Now, tell me what Margaret was talking about. What context am I missing?" Adrian sat down on the worn couch and gestured for Cassandra to join him. "The Northern Frost Pack is led by Alpha Magnus Frost," he began. "He's my father." Cassandra felt her breath catch. "Your father is an Alpha?" "One of the most powerful in the territories," Adrian confirmed. "The Northern Frost Pack controls massive territory, has alliances with dozens of smaller packs, and my father's word carries weight in council meetings that determine policy for half the northern region." "But you said you worked construction," Cassandra said, trying to reconcile this information with everything she knew about Adrian. "You said you had almost nothing." "Because I do have almost nothing," Adrian explained. "When I left everything behind. The inheritance, the title, the position, all of it. I wanted to make it on my own, to prove to myself that I could survive without the power and privilege I'd been born into." He took her hands in his. "Cassandra, I didn't hide this from you to deceive you. I didn't tell you because it doesn't matter anymore. That life, that identity, it's not who I am. I'm just Adrian now, the guy who lives in a warehouse and works odd jobs and happened to find his mate at a gathering. But your father," Cassandra said. "Does he know about me? About us?" "No," Adrian said. "We haven't spoken since I left 5 years ago. He made it clear that if I walked away from the pack, I was walking away from him too. I'm dead to him, essentially. That's the price of principles sometimes." Cassandra sat in silence for a moment, processing this new information. Adrian wasn't just a rogue alpha with no prospects. He was the son of one of the most powerful alphas in the territories, someone who'd given up wealth and status beyond her imagining to stand by his principles. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she asked finally. "Because I didn't want it to matter," Adrian said simply. "I didn't want you to choose me thinking that maybe someday I'd reconcile with my father and you'd get access to all that wealth and power. I needed to know you chose me for who I am now, not for who I used to be or might someday be again." Cassandra felt emotion tighten her throat. "You think I chose you hoping you'd give me a comfortable life eventually?" "No," Adrian said quickly. "No, I know you better than that now. But at the beginning, when we first met, I didn't know you yet. I didn't know if you were someone who could genuinely be happy with nothing, or if you'd always be waiting for me to go back to my father, to reclaim what I gave up." "I would never ask you to compromise your principles," Cassandra said firmly. "Adrian, what you stood up for, protecting Omega rights, opposing hierarchies based on bloodlines, that's exactly the kind of alpha I want to be mated to, even if it means living in a warehouse forever." Adrian pulled her close, and Cassandra felt the mate bond pulse with warmth. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you for being exactly this person, strong, principled, willing to sacrifice comfort for truth. They spent their wedding night in that modest warehouse, and Cassandra found that she didn't miss her childhood home's luxury at all. There was something profoundly intimate about the simplicity, about the way they were building something from nothing together. Over the following weeks, Cassandra adjusted to her new life with surprising ease. She found a job at a small bookshop run by an elderly beta couple who didn't care about pack politics. The pay wasn't much, but combined with Adrian's construction wages, they could afford groceries and keep the warehouse heated. They couldn't afford luxuries, but they had each other, and that was enough. Cassandra learned to cook simple meals with cheap ingredients, discovered that she actually enjoyed the challenge of creating something good with limited resources. She learned to mend clothes instead of replacing them, to appreciate small pleasures like finding a book at a thrift store or taking walks through free public parks. Her family still wasn't speaking to her. Cassandra had tried reaching out once, about a month after the wedding, but her mother had hung up on her, and her father had returned her letter unopened. Charlotte had sent a single text message that read, "Hope you're enjoying your poverty. You made your choice." It hurt, more than Cassandra wanted to admit. But every time she felt the ache of her family's rejection, she'd look at Adrian and remember why she'd made this choice. He was worth it. Their relationship, built on honesty and genuine connection, was worth more than all the pack standing in the world. 3 months after the wedding, everything changed. Cassandra was working at the bookshop when Adrian appeared in the doorway, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said. "Something's happened." They sat in the small break room and Adrian explained. "My father's beta contacted me. My father is dying, some kind of illness that the healers can't cure. He has maybe a month left, and he's asking to see me." "Are you going to go?" Cassandra asked. "I don't know," Adrian admitted. "Part of me says I should. He's my father, regardless of our disagreements. But part of me remembers how he treated me when I left, how he said I was dead to him, how he's made no effort to contact me in 5 years until now when he needs something." "What does he need?" "He wants me to come back," Adrian said. "Wants me to take over the pack when he dies. Says I'm his only heir and the pack needs strong leadership." Cassandra felt something cold settle in her stomach. "And what do you want?" "I want to stay here with you," Adrian said immediately. "I want to keep building this life we've started, but Cassandra, if I refuse, the pack will go to his beta, and that beta is the one who pushed for all those policies I opposed. Every Omega right I fought for will be rolled back. The pack will become exactly what I didn't want it to be." "So you're considering going back," Cassandra said quietly. "Not to reclaim wealth or status," Adrian said quickly, "but to prevent something I believe would be wrong. To protect the wolves who would suffer under that beta's leadership." He took her hands. "But I won't do it if you don't want to come with me. I won't ask you to move to the pack lands, to deal with politics and power games, to give up the simple life we've built here." Cassandra sat in silence thinking. She'd given up her family, her comfortable life, everything she'd known to be with Adrian. And now the universe was offering him a chance to reclaim what he'd sacrificed. It would be easy to resent it, to feel like the sacrifices she'd made were being invalidated. But looking at Adrian's face, seeing the genuine conflict there, she realized something important. He wasn't excited about going back. He wasn't eager to reclaim wealth and power. He was struggling with a moral dilemma, with the question of whether refusing to help would make him complicit in harm. "Adrian," she said carefully, "what do you think your father really wants?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, is he really dying? Or is this a manipulation to get you back? Cassandra asked. And if he is dying, is he asking you to come back because he genuinely wants to reconcile? Or because he needs you to maintain his legacy? Adrian frowned, clearly considering. I honestly don't know. My father is capable of manipulation, but faking a terminal illness seems extreme even for him. Then I think we need more information, Cassandra said. Before we make any decisions about moving to Pack lands or taking over leadership, we need to know exactly what's happening and what would be expected of you. Adrian nodded slowly. You're right. I'll contact the Beta, get more details about my father's condition and what exactly he's asking for. The conversation with the Beta happened 2 days later, and afterward Adrian came home looking shell-shocked. It's real, he said. My father really is dying. Some kind of rare condition that affects alpha wolves, deteriorates their life force. The healers give him 3 weeks, maybe a month. And he wants you to take over the Pack, son, Cassandra said. Not just take over, Adrian corrected. He wants me to come home, to reconcile, to be there when he dies. The Pack leadership is part of it, but according to the Beta, my father's biggest regret is the way things ended between us. Cassandra felt her heart soften slightly. Whatever else Magnus Frost might be, he was a father realizing he'd pushed his son away and wanting to make amends before it was too late. Then you should go, she said. You should see him, talk to him, get closure whether you decide to take over the Pack or not. Come with me, Adrian said. I need you there. I need your strength and perspective. And Cassandra, whatever we decide about the Pack, we decide together. This isn't just my choice anymore. We're mates, partners, equals. The journey to northern Frost Pack lands took 2 days by car, traveling through increasingly remote territory until they reached mountains that seemed to touch the sky. Cassandra had expected wealth, but she hadn't been prepared for the scope of it. The Pack compound wasn't just large, it was massive, sprawling across acres of mountain terrain, with dozens of buildings constructed from stone and timber that must have cost millions. This is where you grew up, Cassandra asked, unable to keep the awe from her voice. This is home, Adrian confirmed, though his tone carried no nostalgia. Or at least it used to be. They were met at the main gates by the Beta, a silver-haired wolf named Marcus who regarded Adrian with an expression somewhere between relief and resentment. Your father will be glad you came, Marcus said, his tone formal. He's in his private quarters, weak but still conscious. And the Pack? Adrian asked. How are they handling the transition? With uncertainty, Marcus said bluntly. Many remember you. Remember why you left. They're not sure if your return means the policies you opposed will be reversed, or if you've changed your stance. My stance hasn't changed, Adrian said firmly. If I take leadership, those policies will absolutely be reversed. Every Omega right that was restricted will be restored. The hierarchy based on bloodlines will be dismantled. That's non-negotiable. Marcus's jaw tightened. The Pack has thrived under the current system. The Pack has thrived because of its territory and resources, not because of its policy, Adrian countered. And thriving for some doesn't mean thriving for all, but this is a conversation for later. Right now, I need to see my father. Magnus Frost looked smaller than Cassandra had imagined. Even lying in an enormous bed in quarters that spoke of wealth beyond measure, he seemed diminished, his alpha presence muted by the illness ravaging his body. His eyes, however, were still sharp, and they fixed on Adrian with an intensity that made Cassandra take an instinctive step back. So you came, Magnus said, his voice weak, but carrying unmistakable authority even now. Wasn't sure you would. You're my father, Adrian said simply. I may disagree with your policies, but I don't hate you. I never hated you. Magnus's gaze shifted to Cassandra. This is your mate? Cassandra Vale, Adrian introduced her. My mate and partner. Whatever you want to discuss, she'll be part of it. Vale, Magnus repeated, clearly recognizing the name. Good bloodline, strong pack. Her family must have been thrilled about her mating with a rogue. They weren't, Cassandra said before Adrian could respond. They disowned me, actually. But I chose Adrian anyway, because mate bonds matter more than pack standing. Something flickered in Magnus's eyes. Might have been respect. Interesting. Most wolves from established families would never make that choice. Then most wolves from established families don't deserve their mates, Cassandra said firmly. Magnus actually smiled, a ghost of expression that suggested he'd once had a sense of humor. I can see why you chose her, Adrian. She's got steel in her spine. He coughed, the sound wet and painful, and when he spoke again, his voice was weaker. I don't have long, so I'll be direct. I was wrong. About the policies, about how I handled your leaving, about prioritizing power over principles. Adrian sat down carefully on the edge of the bed. What changed your mind? Dying changes your perspective, Stit, Magnus said. Makes you think about legacy, about what you'll leave behind. And I realized that the pack I've built, this wealthy, powerful, prestigious pack, is rotting from the inside. Omegas are afraid. Bloodline discrimination is creating resentment, and the hierarchy I established is crushing the very foundation that made us strong in the first place. He reached out and grasped Adrian's hand. You were right to leave, right to refuse to support what I was building, and I need you to come back, not just to lead the pack, but to fix what I've broken. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, emotions playing across his face that Cassandra could feel through the bond. Grief, anger, hope, uncertainty, all tangled together. If I agree to take over the pack, he finally said, I do it on my terms. The policies you implemented get reversed immediately. Omega rights get restored and expanded. The bloodline hierarchy gets dismantled, and anyone who can't accept that can leave. Agreed, Magnus said without hesitation. That's exactly what needs to happen. And Cassandra, Adrian continued, glancing at his mate. She's my Luna, equal partner in leadership. Her voice carries the same weight as mine in all pack decisions. Magnus studied Cassandra again, his dying eyes somehow still sharp. Can you handle that responsibility? Leading a pack this size, dealing with wolves who'll resist change, making decisions that affect thousands of lives. I don't know, Cassandra admitted honestly. I've never done anything like this before, but I'll learn, and I'll do it with integrity, which is more than I can say for many leaders. Magnus actually laughed, the sound turning into another cough. Honest and brave. Adrian, you chose well. My blessing on the mating for what it's worth. It's worth something, Adrian said quietly. Maybe not everything, but something. Over the following days, Magnus and Adrian talked extensively, sometimes including Cassandra, sometimes not. The dying Alpha shared details about pack operations, about alliances and enemies, about the complex politics that governed relationships between packs. He also, in halting conversations that clearly cost him emotionally, apologized for the ultimatum that had forced Adrian to leave, for cutting off contact completely, for letting pride and stubbornness damage their relationship beyond repair. I told myself I was protecting the pack, Magnus admitted during one particularly difficult conversation, that strong policies and clear hierarchies were necessary for survival. But the truth is, I was protecting my own power, my own ego, and I lost my son in the process. You didn't lose me, Adrian said. I'm right here. But for how long? Magnus asked. If I hadn't gotten sick, would you ever have come back? Would I have died never knowing you were happy, never meeting your mate, never having a chance to tell you I was proud of you for standing by your principles, even when it cost you everything? The questions hung in the air unanswered because they both knew the truth. Without the illness forcing the issue, they probably would have remained estranged forever. 2 weeks after their arrival, Magnus Frost died in his sleep. The pack mourned their alpha, but there was also uncertainty in the air. Marcus, the beta, made it clear he believed he should assume leadership given Adrian's 5-year absence. Several other high-ranking wolves agreed, arguing that Adrian had abandoned the pack and therefore forfeited his claim to leadership. But there were also wolves, particularly Omegas and lower-ranking pack members, who remembered why Adrian had left and saw his return as a chance for real change. The pack meeting to determine leadership was held 3 days after Magnus's death in the Great Hall, a massive stone building that could hold the entire pack. Hundreds of wolves gathered, the air thick with tension and competing expectations. Marcus stood at the front and made his case. Adrian Frost may be Magnus's son by blood, but he walked away from this pack 5 years ago. He rejected our ways, our traditions, our leadership structure. He's been living as a rogue in some distant city, disconnected from pack life and pack responsibilities. How can someone who abandoned us now claim the right to lead us? The argument was well crafted and several wolves nodded in agreement. Then Adrian stood, and even though he wore simple clothes and carried none of the markers of wealth or status, his alpha presence filled the room. Marcus is right about one thing, Adrian began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. I did leave, but I didn't abandon this pack out of selfishness or cowardice. I left because I couldn't support policies that I believed were fundamentally wrong. Policies that restricted Omega rights, that valued bloodlines over character, that created hierarchies designed to keep some wolves comfortable while others struggled. He paused, letting his words sink in. I left because I hoped that by making a public stand, by showing that principles matter more than power, I might inspire others to question those policies too. And maybe I failed at that. Maybe my leaving changed nothing. But I never stopped caring about this pack or its members. I never stopped believing that we could be better than what we'd become. An Omega near the front spoke up, her voice trembling but determined. If you become Alpha, what would change? Everything and nothing, Adrian replied. The structures that protect pack members, that provide safety and resources and community, those would remain. But the restrictions, the hierarchies, the policies that value some wolves over others, those would be dismantled immediately. Every pack member, regardless of their designation or bloodline, would have equal voice and equal value. That's idealistic nonsense, Marcus interrupted. Packs need hierarchy. They need clear leadership and defined roles. What you're proposing would create chaos. What I'm proposing would create equity, Adrian countered. There's a difference between leadership, which is necessary, and domination, which is what the current policies support. I'm not suggesting we eliminate all structure. I'm suggesting we build structure that serves everyone, not just those at the top. The debate continued for hours with various pack members voicing opinions and concerns. Cassandra sat quietly through most of it, observing the dynamics, learning the personalities, understanding the complex web of relationships that made up pack politics. But when one wolf, a high-ranking beta, suggested that Adrian's mate was proof he didn't understand pack values, since he'd chosen someone with no connections to Northern Frost. Cassandra stood. "You're right," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I have no connections to this pack. I didn't grow up here. I don't know your traditions or your history, but I do know what it feels like to be rejected by family for choosing love over status. I know what it's like to live simply, to work hard for every meal, to build something from nothing with just integrity and determination." She looked around the hall, meeting eyes of wolves who'd probably lived in luxury their entire lives. "Adrian and I spent the last 3 months living in a converted warehouse, working odd jobs to pay for groceries. We know what it's like to struggle, to go without, to make sacrifices for principles. And that experience, that perspective, is exactly what leadership needs. Not someone who's never known hardship, trying to make decisions about wolves who face hardship every day, but someone who's lived it, who understands it, who can lead with genuine empathy and wisdom." The hall fell silent, and Cassandra could feel hundreds of eyes on her. Then, slowly, an Omega in the back stood and began to clap. Another joined, then another, until half the room was applauding while the other half sat in uncomfortable silence. The vote, when it finally came, was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Adrian Frost would become the next alpha of the Northern Frost Pack, with Cassandra Vale as his Luna. Marcus and several other high-ranking wolves left the pack immediately, refusing to serve under leadership they considered too radical. Others stayed, but made their disapproval clear through barely concealed resentment. But many, particularly those who'd suffered under the old policies, embraced the change with desperate hope. Adrian's first act as Alpha was to formally abolish every policy his father had implemented that restricted Omega rights or created bloodline-based hierarchies. His second act was to establish a council that included representatives from every designation and rank, ensuring that leadership decisions reflected the entire pack's perspectives rather than just elite voices. The transition was not smooth. Change never is, especially when it threatens established power structures. There were protests from wolves who benefited from the old system, who saw equality as a threat rather than progress. There were attempts at sabotage, rumors spread about Adrian's fitness to lead, whispers that Cassandra had bewitched him into abandoning pack traditions. But through it all, Adrian remained steady, his principles unwavering, and Cassandra discovered that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. She could mediate disputes with wisdom that came from understanding multiple perspectives. She could comfort Omega parents who'd lost hope that their children could have better lives. She could stand firm against aggressive alphas who tried to intimidate her. She could lead, genuinely lead, because she cared more about doing what was right than about being liked or maintaining comfortable illusions. 3 months into their leadership, on a cold evening when snow was falling softly outside the Alpha's quarters, Adrian found Cassandra standing by the window, staring out at the packlands that now fell under their protection. "Thinking about your family, tapas on de tampas ifania?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "A little," Cassandra admitted. "Wondering if they know about all this, if they've heard that the Omega daughter they disowned is now Luna of one of the most powerful packs in the territories." "Do you want to contact them?" Adrian asked. "Let them know you're okay." "No," Cassandra said after a moment. "They made their choice based on superficial judgments about worth and status. Learning that I'm now wealthy and powerful wouldn't change anything fundamental about who they are or what they value. I'd rather build relationships with people who saw my worth when I had nothing. She turned in his arms to face him. Adrian, do you ever regret it? Coming back here? Taking on all this responsibility? You could have refused, and we'd still be in that warehouse, living simply. And thousands of wolves would be suffering under Marcus's leadership, Adrian replied. No, I don't regret it. But Cassandra, I want you to know something. If you're miserable here, if this life is too much, we can leave. We can walk away from all of it, go back to the city, live simply again. I won't choose the pack over you. I'm not miserable, Cassandra said honestly. I'm overwhelmed sometimes, and definitely still learning, but I'm not miserable. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something that matters. Something that makes a real difference in people's lives. That's worth the challenges. You're remarkable, Adrian said softly. You know that? You gave up everything to be with me when I had nothing. And now that we have everything, you're focused on using it to help others rather than enjoying the comfort. I learned from the best, Cassandra replied. You gave up everything first, remember? Walked away from all this wealth and power because it came with conditions you couldn't accept. I just followed your example. They stood there, in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall over packlands that were slowly transforming into something better, something more equitable, more compassionate, more aligned with the values the moon goddess intended for wolf packs. It wasn't perfect yet, probably never would be perfect. But it was better, and that was enough. The knock on their door was hesitant, almost apologetic. Adrian called out permission to enter, and a young Omega named Sophia slipped inside, her eyes downcast in a habitual submission that still made Cassandra's chest tighten. Forgive the interruption, Alpha. Luna, Sophia said quietly. But there are visitors at the gates asking for entry. They say they're Luna Cassandra's family. Cassandra felt her heart skip a beat. My family? Are you sure? They gave their names as Richard Vale, Martha Vale, and Charlotte Vale, Sophia confirmed. Should we turn them away? Adrian looked at Cassandra, letting her make the decision. No, she said finally. Let them in. Bring them to the formal receiving room. We'll meet them there. The walk to the receiving room felt longer than it actually was, every step giving Cassandra time to wonder what had brought her family here after months of complete silence. Had they heard about her new position? Were they coming to congratulate her, or to try to benefit from her new status? When they entered the receiving room, Cassandra's family was already waiting, looking uncomfortable in the formal space. Her father's eyes were fixed on the floor. Her mother was clutching her purse like it might save her from drowning. And Charlotte, perfect Charlotte, looked around the room with barely concealed envy. Mother, father, Charlotte, Cassandra greeted them with formal politeness. This is unexpected. Cassandra, her mother began, her voice trembling. We heard about Magnus Frost dying, about Adrian becoming Alpha. We wanted to. That is, we thought perhaps. You thought perhaps you'd made a mistake in disowning me, Cassandra finished when her mother faltered. Now that I'm Luna of a powerful pack instead of mate to a poor rogue. The silence that followed was damning in its completeness. Her father still couldn't meet her eyes. Her mother's face had gone red with shame. Charlotte was the only one who managed to speak. You have to understand, Cassandra. We didn't know who Adrian really was. If we'd known he was Magnus Frost's son, that he'd inherit all this, we never would have objected. Exactly, Cassandra said, her voice cold. If you'd known he had wealth and status waiting for him, you would have supported the mating. But when you thought he was just a poor rogue with nothing to offer except love and integrity, you disowned me. You're proving right now that you don't understand what actually matters. We were trying to protect you, her mother protested weakly. From what? Cassandra asked. From being happy? From building a genuine partnership based on mutual respect? From learning what real strength and character look like? She moved to stand beside Adrian, presenting a united front. I spent 3 months living in a warehouse with my mate, working to afford groceries, learning to live simply and be happy with what truly matters. Those 3 months taught me more about life, about value, about genuine connection than all the years I spent in your comfortable home, learning to measure worth by status and appearance. But you're wealthy now, Charlotte pointed out, as if that proved something. So it all worked out. You can forgive us now, right? Let us back into your life? Wealth is irrelevant, Cassandra said firmly. Adrian and I would be just as committed to each other if we were still in that warehouse. The wealth is just a tool we're using to help the pack members who need it. It doesn't change who we are fundamentally. Adrian spoke for the first time, his voice carrying alpha authority. Richard, Martha, Charlotte, I understand that you made decisions based on what you believed was best for Cassandra. But those decisions revealed something about your values, about what you believe makes someone worthy of respect and love. And those values are incompatible with how Cassandra and I choose to live. We can change, Cassandra's father said, finally looking up. We can learn to value what you value. Can you? Cassandra asked gently. Or are you just saying what you think we want to hear because now we have power and resources you'd like access to? The question hung in the air, unanswered, because everyone in the room knew the truth. Her family had come not because they'd had a genuine change of heart, but because the circumstances had changed in ways that made reconnecting advantageous. I think you should leave, Cassandra said finally. Maybe someday you'll genuinely understand what you did wrong. Maybe someday you'll value people for who they are, rather than what they have. But until that day comes, we don't have anything to say to each other. Her mother started to protest, but her father stopped her with a hand on her arm. She's right, he said quietly. We came here for the wrong reasons. Cassandra, your mother and I, we failed you. We valued appearances over substance, status over character, and we lost our daughter because of it. He stood, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I'm proud of you, for choosing love over comfort, for standing by your principles even when it cost you everything, for becoming someone worthy of respect not because of your position but because of your character. I'm proud, and I'm sorry, and I hope someday you might be able to forgive us. They left quietly, Charlotte casting one last envious look at the wealth that could have been hers if she'd supported her sister instead of mocking her. After they were gone, Cassandra stood in silence, processing the encounter. Adrian waited patiently, letting her work through her emotions without rushing her. I thought I'd feel vindicated, Cassandra said finally, seeing them realize they were wrong, seeing them have to acknowledge that I made the right choice. But I just feel sad. Because you loved them, Adrian said gently, and they hurt you. Vindication doesn't heal that kind of wound. Do you think they'll change? Cassandra asked. Genuinely change, not just pretend. I don't know, Adrian admitted. But whether they do or not, you've already moved on. You've built something better, something that matters. Their opinion doesn't define your worth anymore. Over the following years, the Northern Frost Pack transformed completely. The policies that had restricted Omegas were not just abolished, but replaced with protections and support systems. The bloodline-based hierarchy was dismantled and replaced with merit-based recognition. The pack became known throughout the territories not for its wealth or power, but for its equity, It's compassion. It's genuine care for all members, regardless of designation or status. Cassandra grew into her role as Luna with a grace that came from genuine caring rather than political calculation. She established programs to support struggling families, created educational opportunities for young wolves who wanted to develop skills beyond traditional roles, and personally counseled pack members dealing with rejection, discrimination, or loss. She became beloved not because she was powerful, but because she was present, accessible, genuinely invested in the well-being of every wolf under her protection. Adrian's leadership was marked by the same integrity that had defined his character when he had nothing. He made decisions based on principles rather than politics, valued truth over comfort, and built alliances with other packs based on mutual respect rather than strategic advantage. Together, they proved that leadership could be both strong and compassionate, that power could be used to elevate others rather than dominate them, that wealth was meaningful only when it served a purpose beyond accumulation. 5 years after taking leadership, Cassandra was walking through the Packlands when she encountered a young Omega named Sarah, who was crying quietly on a bench. "What's wrong?" Cassandra asked, sitting down beside her. "I was rejected," Sarah said through her tears. "My supposed mate said I wasn't good enough, that I had nothing to offer. And now everyone's talking about it, saying I must be defective if my own mate didn't want me." Cassandra felt a sharp pain in her chest, remembering how she'd felt when her own family had rejected her for her choice of mate. "Can I tell you something?" she said gently. "Something I learned the hard way?" Sarah nodded, wiping at her tears. "Being rejected doesn't mean you're not good enough. It means the person who rejected you couldn't see your value. My own family rejected me when I chose to mate with Adrian. They said he had nothing to offer, that I was throwing my life away, that I'd regret choosing love over status. But you're Luna now," Sarah said, confused. "You have everything." "Now I do," Cassandra agreed. "But for 3 months, Adrian and I lived in a converted warehouse with barely enough money for food. We worked odd jobs, struggled to survive, had nothing but each other. And you know what? Those were some of the happiest months of my life, because I was with someone who valued me for who I am, not for what I could offer him." She took Sarah's hands in hers. "The wolf who rejected you did you a favor. They cleared the path for you to find someone who will recognize your worth, someone who will choose you not because you're perfect or because you offer some advantage, but because you're exactly who they need. And Sarah, that person is out there. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes about true mates." "How do I survive until then?" Sarah asked. "How do I deal with everyone's judgment and pity?" "By knowing your own worth," Cassandra said firmly. "By building a life that matters regardless of whether you have a mate. By refusing to let anyone else's opinion define who you are or what you're capable of. And by remembering that every great love story includes obstacles. This is yours. How you handle it will determine the strength of what you build afterward." Sarah left looking slightly more hopeful, and Cassandra sat on the bench for a while longer, thinking about her journey from rejected daughter to beloved Luna. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of pain, of wondering if she'd made terrible mistakes. But looking back, she wouldn't change any of it. Every hardship had taught her something valuable. Every sacrifice had proven that she was stronger than she'd imagined. Every moment of struggling with Adrian in that warehouse had built a foundation of partnership that could withstand any challenge. That evening, as she and Adrian sat together in their private quarters, Cassandra said, "Do you remember the night before our wedding? When I was standing in that tiny apartment, staring at my wedding dress and wondering if I was making a mistake. "I remember," Adrian said. "I could feel your anxiety through the bond even before I came to check on you." "I was terrified," Cassandra admitted. "Not of marrying you, but of everything it meant. Losing my family, living in poverty, being judged by everyone who knew about my choice." "And now?" Adrian asked. "Now I understand that those fears were valid but ultimately irrelevant," Cassandra said. "Yes, I lost my family. Yes, we lived in poverty for a while. Yes, people judged me. But none of that mattered as much as building something real and true with you. And Adrian, even if we were still in that warehouse, even if we'd never come back here and taken over the pack, I'd still be happy. Because I chose love over comfort. And that was the best decision I ever made. I love you," Adrian said simply, "for choosing me when I had nothing, for standing beside me when it meant sacrificing everything, for being exactly the kind of Luna this pack needed, compassionate and strong in equal measure." "I love you for giving up everything first," Cassandra replied, "for teaching me that principles matter more than comfort, for showing me what real integrity looks like, for being the kind of alpha who leads with heart as well as strength." They sat in comfortable silence, two wolves who'd found each other against all odds, who'd built something meaningful from nothing, who'd proven that true worth had nothing to do with wealth or status, and everything to do with character and choice. Outside their window, the pack land stretched into darkness, thousands of wolves, living under leadership that valued them as individuals rather than assets. And somewhere in that darkness, young wolves like Sarah were learning that rejection wasn't the end of their story, that struggle could be a teacher, that love was worth any sacrifice. Cassandra thought about the journey that had brought her here, from disowned daughter to beloved Luna, from lost and rejected to found and valued. She thought about the 3 months in the warehouse that had taught her what really mattered. She thought about her family showing up once she had status again, revealing that they'd learned nothing about genuine worth. And she thought about Adrian, the alpha who'd appeared poor but had always been rich in the ways that truly counted. "You know what's funny," she said suddenly. "People probably think I married a poor alpha king and then got lucky when he turned out to have a wealthy inheritance waiting, like I gambled and won." "And the truth?" Adrian asked. "The truth is I didn't gamble at all. I made a deliberate choice based on what I knew about your character, your principles, your heart. The wealth was a complete surprise, but it didn't change anything fundamental. If anything, it just gave us tools to help others the way we'd wished someone had helped us." Cassandra smiled. "I didn't marry a poor alpha king hoping he'd become wealthy. I married a man who valued integrity over comfort, who fought for what was right, even when it cost him everything, who loved me for who I was rather than what I could offer him. The fact that he happened to also be the heir to one of the most powerful packs in the territories, that was just a plot twist we dealt with when it came. So the story isn't, she married a poor man who became rich," Adrian said, understanding dawning. "The story is, she married a rich man who chose to be poor, and then circumstances forced him to be rich again, and they used that wealth to help others instead of themselves." "Exactly," Cassandra agreed. "We didn't luck into this. We chose it, again and again, through every hardship and obstacle. We chose each other. We chose principles over comfort. We chose to build something that mattered. And now we're using the resources we have to make sure other wolves don't have to suffer the way we did." Years later, when young wolves would ask Cassandra for advice about choosing mates or making difficult decisions, she'd tell them her story, not to brag about her position or wealth, but to illustrate a deeper truth about what creates lasting happiness. I married Adrian when he was living in a warehouse and working construction, she'd say. My family disowned me for it. People thought I was insane, but I'd felt the mate bond, and I knew who he was fundamentally. His character, his principles, his heart. That was enough. She'd pause, making sure they understood. Later, we inherited wealth and power, but that wasn't why I chose him. I chose him because of who he was when he had nothing, because he'd given up wealth and status to stand by his principles, because he valued integrity over comfort. The money and power that came later, those were just tools we used to help build the kind of pack we'd wished existed when we were struggling. So what's the lesson? She'd ask. Don't marry someone for their potential wealth or status. Marry them for who they are right now, with nothing added and nothing taken away. Marry them because you respect their character and share their values. Marry them because you'd rather struggle together than live comfortably apart. Everything else, wealth, status, comfort, those are bonuses that may or may not come. But character, that's forever. And the young wolves would listen, some of them understanding immediately, others taking years to grasp the truth of what she was saying. But the words would stay with them, a reminder that real worth had nothing to do with external circumstances and everything to do with internal qualities. The Northern Frost Pack continued to thrive under Adrian and Cassandra's leadership, becoming a model for other packs throughout the territories. Other alphas would visit, trying to understand how they'd created such a successful balance of strength and compassion, authority and accessibility. Adrian would always credit Cassandra, saying that her perspective as someone who'd lived both in luxury and poverty, who'd experienced both acceptance and rejection, gave her unique insight into what wolves truly needed. Cassandra would always credit Adrian, pointing out that he'd taught her by example what it meant to lead with integrity, to value principles over politics, to make decisions based on what was right, rather than what was comfortable. The truth was, they'd taught each other, two wolves who'd found each other when one had nothing material to offer, and the other was willing to give up everything to be with him. They'd built something extraordinary, not because of wealth or power, but because of character and commitment. And when they were old, looking back on a lifetime of partnership and service, they'd both agree that the 3 months in the warehouse, struggling to survive with nothing but each other, had been the greatest blessing of their lives, because those months had stripped away every superficial comfort and forced them to build their relationship on the only foundation that truly mattered: genuine love, mutual respect, and shared values. The story of Cassandra and Adrian became legend in pack territories, told to young wolves as an example of what true mating should look like. Not a transaction or strategic alliance, but a partnership built on choosing each other despite obstacles, standing together through hardship, and using whatever resources came their way to help others, rather than simply accumulating more comfort for themselves. They'd proven that you don't marry someone for their potential or their resources. You marry them for their character, their integrity, their heart. And if wealth and power come later, you use those gifts to build something that matters, something that helps others, something that makes the world a little bit better. Then you found it. Because that's what real leadership looks like. That's what genuine love creates. And that's why the moon goddess pairs souls together, not based on superficial compatibility, but on deep recognition of shared values and complementary strengths. Cassandra had married what appeared to be a poor alpha king, but the truth was, she'd married the richest man she'd ever met, because he was rich in all the ways that actually mattered. And everything that came after, the wealth, the power, the position, those were just footnotes to the real story, which was two people choosing each other again and again through every circumstance life threw at them, building something beautiful from nothing but love and determination, and an absolute refusal to compromise their principles, regardless of the cost.